start with this. We mentioned it at the top of the show. Let's just give you our considered, consolidated thoughts on Paul Kimmage's. It's the first part, I think, of a series in which he, to use the Irish Independent's headline, investigates Irish horse racing's dirty secrets. This, Dave Yates, is an expansion on the initial interview that Paul did with Jim Bolger several months ago.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we have to go back, don't we, to October 2020, which was the first Jim Bolger interview, I think, in the Irish field, in which he said that Irish racing had a drugs problem.
This was with Dara O'Cahir.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then since then, there have been various articles that both David Walsh and Paul Kimmage are right on top of this story. The most recent one in today's paper...
This is the Irish Independent.
In the Irish Independent, talks about Stephen Mahon, the trainer who is currently suspended for welfare breaches by the IHRB. Talks about... So we've got almost a chain of whistleblowing here, haven't we? We've got Stephen Mahon, who quotes his contact, John Doe, who has been working in the stables of Trainer X.
So we don't know the identity of John Doe, obviously. We don't know the identity of Trainer X. Stephen Mahon is the conduit, it seems, between the thoughts originally of Jim Bolger, that's where he was getting his information from, and his man inside the stable, John Doe, who had formerly been somebody who I think had held a licence and couldn't get on.
Yeah, that's right. And John Doe tells Stephen Mahon that Trainer X, that I'm just reading from my notes, corticosteroids that are used like salts, a couple of brand names of testosterone as well that are routinely applied to the horses. So and
that tracks are being very well covered as well. So
yes,
there's an element
indeed.
of subterfuge and deceit, which is all very well organised, so that they know exactly how to play the system, even if the substances they're using are not like off-label substances.
Paul Kimmage's piece also details conversations with Stephen Mahon and Lynn Hillier of the IHRB with regard to what the IHRB will do about this as part of its anti-doping programme. As I said at the top of the programme, there are some buffers which we always reach with this, and they are in John Doe, Trainer X, in that the legal ramifications, you don't need to be Rumpole of the Bailey to appreciate those, that if anybody were to be named in this instance, then it would trigger a pretty hefty legal response.
Part 2 is going to come very soon. Be interesting to see. It's very readable, this. It's very interesting. Contextually, I mean, there's some stuff in there that's not strictly germane to the case, but contextually it's very interesting, very readable, as you'd expect. It's that gentle kind of thrum all the time, isn't it, of is it clean? Is the sport clean? Even if a person is not being named. And it's just that all the time.
And I don't mean this I mean this as an observation rather than a criticism, but the contextual stuff that surrounds the nitty-gritty is there to... It's not that if you think that there are dirty secrets that need to be unearthed in racing, the contextual stuff around it, almost the surround sound, isn't going to disabuse you of that, even though it's not going to lead you to a phrase I don't want to use, but smoking gun.
And it's going to invite you to consider the way in which the Irish Horse Racing Regulatory Board police these cases. It's going to invite you to consider whether they're doing it properly, whether they're being lent on by higher powers to either brush things under the carpet or to deal with situations in a way otherwise they wouldn't have done. That's the way it's just taking the reader into those realms quietly. IHRB has said all info received by the IHRB is assessed and acted upon, may include escalating to relevant authorities. All info received is treated on a confidential basis. That was a statement that they gave me this morning, so sort of a holding statement. We'll wait to see how that progresses. We wait to see how the career of Oisin Murphy progresses. I'm sure it will progress very well when he gets back on a racecourse. The question will be, when is he going to get back on a racecourse after the hearing this week into multiple breaches of the alcohol limits, once at Chester and once at Newmarket, well publicised, and more seriously in terms of how much he could be given for it, in terms of a sentence, the breach of COVID protocols when he was found to have misled investigators.
Yes, indeed. As you say, there are the two failed breathalyzer tests, May 2021, and of course on Philly's Mile Day at Newmarket in September. Yes, there is the issue of misleading officials as to his whereabouts between September the 9th and September the 12th with regard to the observation of COVID protocols. So if we wind the clock back to, well, November the 12th was the last time we saw Oisin Murphy in action riding. The following month, the hearing was scheduled for mid-December, but after representations from Oisin Murphy's lawyers, it was delayed whilst he sought medical support for the issues that he needs to sort out. Now, on Tuesday, the hearing will take place. As you say, it's the COVID stuff is likely to be more seriously dealt with, isn't it? When we discussed this at the beginning of the week, I think I put the likely, I guessed at the likely ban of between 3 and 6 months. It's going to be nearer 6 than 3, isn't it? Well, I think that the BHA...
It's a bit of a how long's a piece of string, because
yeah,
if you add up all the entry points for the various different offences and then try and work out what leeway they might give themselves, it could be anything up to a couple of years, but it's unlikely to be that.
The BHA have put this in a unusually, if one looks to the past, but probably not unusually in terms of what will happen in the future, that at the time in December they were apt to reference an individual's mental health, that they have a disciplinary role to fulfil as part of the regulator, but they must do that with appreciation of mental health difficulties that the accused, if you like, is facing. So that will come into it. Oisin Murphy is 26. He's clearly over the last couple of years had issues that he has sought to address and that he needs to address. He's admitted as much. That's not any revelatory.
It's going to help him that he's not really contesting any of this,
yes,
isn't it?
It is.
Because it'll help expedite the process as well.
But the point I want to make is that he's 26 years old. He was 26 in September, and he seems to have been around for an awful long time. He was whenever that 4-timer on Air Gold Cup day, he must have been in his teens at that point, and he's got a long and successful career ahead of him. Qatar Racing have stood by him, and all of us who love horse racing and love flat racing want him to sort out those issues and then have another successful, 2 and a bit decades riding. Let's hope that's what happens.
And by the same token, the British Horse Racing Authority will know that it's in their interest that the judicial panel give him a sentence that answers to some of the charges, or the severity of some of the charges that are there.
Those are the balances any regulator, any judicial process needs to find, aren't they?
Okay, so that'll start Tuesday?
Yeah, Tuesday.
Starts Tuesday. All right, Tiger, I almost crossed it off, but it's almost going to get double time here for all sorts of reasons, because everyone's jumped in on it. Tiger Roll apparently won't run in the Grand National.
Tiger Roll will not run in the 2022 Grand National. It's the gift that keeps on giving for journalists, this, because...
for lazy journalists, isn't it? It's for us lazy journalists. I've done it as well, isn't it?
No, not lazy journalists.
Don't we just go, well, excellent,
okay,
excellent.
all right.
Michael O'Leary on Tiger Roll.
All right.
Yeah,
you
Michael,
might think that. Okay. Work for a tabloid newspaper or even a broadsheet newspaper, ring them and say, got a lovely piece with Rachel Blackmore telling us how much at the launch today, telling us what a thrill it was to win the Randox Grand National. Lovely piece. I'll just press the button now, and you're driving home from Liverpool and you get a call from the sports editor to say, listen, mate, Michael O'Leary said that Tiger Roll's not going to run. We're going to rip your stuff out and you'll have to do something new on Tiger Roll. That wasn't me, but it was it was a couple of unnamed press room colleagues that happened to. So, nuts and bolts.
You never bothered with the Rachel Blackmore stuff. You just went straight in for the O'Leary.
I was working on other projects on Tuesday, but that's by the by. Listen, the horse didn't run in 2021 when he was given a rating of 166. Martin Greenwood on Tuesday gave him 161. This was Panda's absurd and an idiotic opinion by Michael O'Leary. He doesn't want Tiger Roll to run, and so. Yeah, we won't see Tiger Roll. A great shame. Remember that Red Rum was 12 after 2 fallow years, having won his first 2 Grand Nationals. But another point to this is that the BHA, unusually for them, came out in defence of Martin Greenwood, the handicapper, this week. Richard Wayman, the CEO, said that we're not going to rise to the O'Leary's comments on this occasion. He thanked the number cruncher Greenwood for his thorough and fair approach as always. But interestingly, in the future, when the code of conduct that the BHA is finalising, I think that'll be out in the coming weeks and months, won't it? So that's I think that's what I said. It was woolly enough, imprecise enough. That such outbursts like that in future will be dealt with.
Really?
Well, yes.
Whilst I don't agree with Michael O'Leary, and I think he's getting too bogged down in the absolute pounds and ounces a horse will be carrying rather than the relativity of the horse's merit to others in the race. I think it's kind of absurd and he should be running. I sort of defend his right to sort of say what he wants. If he wants to slag the handicapper off, fine. And I also take all the points that he might have been irresponsible to talk about the horse's welfare. But should that be regulated by the BHA? I mean,
because if you
want to be
up to a point, if you describe an official's opinion as idiotic, well, okay, maybe that's what I'm saying. It's borderline. If you say that official does not want that horse to run, I think you are very clearly over the other side of the line, because you're not saying, like, same with referees in football. If we broaden that out, you say, well, it clearly wasn't a penalty. I don't know what the referee was thinking about. He never touched him. He's not that kind of player, by the way. Then that's a criticism of the referee's opinion. If you are then claiming that he's not impartial by saying he's got something against Barnstonesworth, he does this every week, well, that's when the trouble starts. If you say Martin Greenwood doesn't want the horse to run,
you're impugning him in some way. Right, okay, fine. Well, that leads us on neatly to the next point, because Barry Hearn, the celebrated sports promoter and a man who has got a deep appreciation of horse racing through his owning and breeding exploits, he said that the sport needs characters, either two-legged or four. It doesn't have enough characters in it. Now, I put it to you, not only is Tiger Roll an equine character, Michael O'Leary is a character. He gets us talking about him.
Yeah,
he's an interesting person.
Yes, I totally get that. I mean, I've benefited from Michael O'Leary's his,
as has every member of the media.
Of course, you go to I don't have Michael O'Leary's mobile phone, but I can go up to him at a racecourse and say, can I have a chat about this? And he'll sort of say, what do you want to talk to me for? As if like, well, you know very well. And then he'll proceed to talk for about 10 or 11 minutes. And you ring the office and say, I've got some good stuff.
He's not Mrs. Doyle from Father Ted.
With Michael O'Leary. Now, with regard to the characters, I think that it's a lament. It's a common lament that there aren't the characters in the game these days. It's a sport that I love and follow, snooker. It's one that's always made it, and it's not true. There are some great characters in snooker, as there are in horse racing. I'm always envious of the American racing media when they can do of which you are a central figure. When you do a Kentucky Derby and there are these good old boys who aren't oil sheiks that you can't get hold of, or the Coolmore triumvirate again, whom one can't ring. I must say, Anthony Oppenheimer with Golden Horn during that season. I approached him at I think it was Sandown and said, it'd be really great if I could get hold of you. And he just said, well, I'll give you my mobile. And the ability to talk to a Derby-winning owner during the season was a huge boost to the sport, his accessibility. Sorry, we've run out of time. With Barry Hearn, he also wrote that Tiger Roll was
like Federer without
Federer, which I think that's overstating Tiger Roll. Yeah, of course he's part of the story. He didn't run last year. Rachel Blackmore won it on Minella Times. No one gave a tinker's cuss about Tiger Roll in the press room after that. We were all trying to get Grant Rowley to serve up Rachel Blackmore to us. With limited success.
It's a good job you've let that go.
Of course, we want to tell all the tales that we can to illustrate what a great sport horse racing is. We benefit from that ourselves. What's sauce for the goose, etc., etc. But in the case of Tiger Roll, of course, it's a shame. But he's merely one part of the story, isn't he?
And it was merely one story this week. We spent quite a lot of time talking about Sir Mark Todd. The first airing of this video was the night leading into the show last week. So we did speak about it at the beginning of last week's programme at some length. The news this week is that Sir Mark has had his licence suspended whilst the BHA carry out further investigations. Yes,
this was on Wednesday, I think, and I must say I've gone through the sort of arc of feeling of reaction. So on Monday, we spoke about it, and I said I felt shocked. And obviously, Sir Mark Todd had apologised. There's been a whole a very broad spectrum of opinion expressed on social media, usually on the extremes, as is often the case with that medium. My take on it was changed materially by actually speaking to Sir Mark Todd. I rang the number a couple of times, didn't get an answer, kept trying, and as one has been used to doing over the last, nearly 30 years, I said, "Hi Mark, it's Dave Yates here from the Daily Mirror, how are you?" And of course it was a dumb question because he's not very bright, and he said, "Well, how would you expect?" And it brought home to me that this is somebody with a huge body of work in his field, who is hugely decorated in this, who by his own admission has made a mistake. We don't really know the context surrounding the short clip.
That evidently is becoming clearer, according to Horse and Hound this week, who have published a lengthy statement that has been sent by an anonymous spectator who witnessed this cross-country schooling event, and who has sent that to the BHA in support of Todd's good character.
I winced when I saw him the first, because there are 10 hits, and the first one he runs with a branch at the horse's back. So that made me wince. And as you know, I'm a staunch supporter of the Procus, which is a completely different issue. So we're not going to talk about that or confuse the two right now. But he's admitted his mistakes. He expects censure from the BHA. He's already had part of that by the suspension, temporary suspension of his licence.
Were they right to suspend the licence pending?
I don't know, really. I think that's a moot point, to be honest. But I think that as I say, my situation this week, I'm not here to defend Sir Mark Todd, but I am here to express the opinion that that this is something that needs a bit of context, and it needs. There are nuances to it rather than the sort of Twitter, right, that's it, he's out. It's people must either be sacked. So an activity on Twitter must either be compulsory or banned, mustn't it? And there's very little in between. And I'm just merely saying that I think that in this instance, the middle ground, or somewhere within it, is probably the best place to be.
You're going to get the first Rachel Blackmore interview this year, I'm told. Okay, the gambling review. We are edging, we believe, closer to the white paper. We think we've spoken to a number of members of Parliament over the last few weeks. We've tried to draw as many strands together as possible. This week, there's been much more strength of feeling towards the bookmakers and their own responsibilities to customers. Dave, what do you want to touch on?
Yeah, there have been a couple of things this week. The Michael Duggar did an interview with Bill Barber in the Racing
A call
Post.
to arms?
Yeah, it was a call to arms. And I think that you had Andrew Bridgen on last week's Luck on Sunday. Now, obviously, there was an exchange in Parliament where gambling minister, if you like, Chris Phil.
Well, he is for these purposes.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Said that he gave an assurance that the gambling review would not undermine the financial condition of horse racing. And I think a few people breathed a sigh of relief when they heard that. And I think Michael Duggar's call to arms this week was to say, right, that this job isn't done yet, that racing needs to get off its backside.
Didn't go down that well, I don't think, in BHA Towers, that.
Yes,
amongst certain board members of the BHA.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. The other thing that was at the start of this week, was it that ARC said that their tracks would no longer.
No, that was the previous week.
It was the previous week.
We've done that.
Okay. Excuse me.
Would no longer take casino-based advertising from bookmakers. Yeah.
And so we've hoped for. Ever since this was announced in December 2020, the initial feeling of dread that this is going to impact on horse racing, I think that many of us have felt that, well, actually, if we can demonstrate that bookmakers are behaving responsibly, that there is a difference between wagering on a horse and betting on games of pure chance, then horse racing not only has an opportunity to limit the damage, but possibly benefit
from it. And that, of course, is balanced for many people, and quite understandably so, by the need to hold the major betting firms to account for their own increasingly restrictive practices.
Yeah.
So that, on one hand, the sport wants to support the betting industry in not having over censorious regulation in Parliament, but on the other hand, it wants to hold their feet to the fire and say, well, come on, treat our customers the way we would like them to be treated so that they continue to bet with you. It's a very delicate balance for the sport to strike, which I think is why Joe Somerez-Smith from the Gambling Strategy Group and the BHA are just being a little tentative in what they say publicly.
Yeah. I mean, the way that bookmakers' behaviour has obviously come under the spotlight here, isn't it? With regard to it's in the problem is in terms of share prices, bookmaking companies don't necessarily take a long-term view, do they? They take a shorter to medium-term view, I would say, in terms of...
Particularly as the companies themselves have become bigger and bigger and bigger. So massive, great beer moths, international, firms. That level of personal customer relationship is naturally going to dissipate.
Yeah. Last one. Number 7. Come on.
Australian Raiders at Royal Ascot. I sense you're flagging.
No,
I've let you go over the 2 minutes every time.
No. Just the clock is started. I felt with that a natural.
I've had the Prokish on you today.
Right,
so I'm going to set this up.
Right.
The Lightning Stakes at Flemington.
Yeah.
Yes, yesterday. Won by the Coolmore-owned Home Affairs, beating Nature Strip. His Chris Waller trained and a more high-profile stable companion. James McDonald, through his association with Waller and with Coolmore, had chosen to ride Home Affairs over the unlucky Nature Strip, who was ridden by Jamie Carr. The pair of them could come to Royal Ascot. They're coming out of a race which has supplied any number of Royal Ascot winners. How badly would Royal Ascot now like to entertain Australians again?
Yeah, very badly, I would say, as a result of COVID. Well, we did have... Wesley Ward as an international challenger, didn't we? Campanelli, of course, was promoted in the 6 furlong race. The
Platinum. The Commonwealth Cup.
Yes, and we've not had Australian runners, as you say. This was an interesting race. If anyone would like to watch it, Nature Strip, who's a 6-5 favourite, gets squeezed out at the start. Home Affairs takes advantage of that and then in the end clings on by a short head. in that 5 furlong race. And yeah, we will. I'm sure that Nick Smith will be doing his utmost to. That's an area that during the first internationalisation, I suppose, of Royal Ascot, it was particularly the sprinters from Australia that they targeted.
Well, Choisier was the poster boy,
Absolutely.
wasn't he? And then that begat Takeover Target and Miss Andretti and Scenic Blast and all the others.
Yeah, Black Caviar, of course.
Black Caviar.
And so, yeah, of course, it's a great boost to the meeting, isn't it? I often wonder whether in terms of punting, one likes just to deal with horses that one knows from one's own continent, but I think that's now an old-fashioned view. And I'd be these two will be a real addition to Royal Ascot 2022. Let's hope we see them in June.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Those were this week's Talking Points.